Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here, back with another detailed update on Invest 97L for August 1st, 2024. So here's a zoomed out view showing our Invest 97L here within a wave pocket that we have right now over Hispaniola. If we look at the cloud pattern here, it is becoming slightly better organized than what it was even yesterday. We're starting to get these streamer like cirrus clouds that kind of radiate from the deep convection, and this does look a little bit healthier overall on this imagery than it did yesterday. So even if it does look healthier on the visible satellite imagery with those cirrus clouds that radiate out from the deeper convection masses that we have, there is no indication yet that there is a circulation. That means a closed low or a much sharper wave envelope where we get winds out of this direction and then they curve around and then come out of the northerly direction on the other side. Instead, we still have a loose wave here, little sharper than yesterday, but still rather loose in nature, where we do have winds out of the southeasterly direction, then they come in out of the easterly direction on the northern side, and then they come down like this, with maybe hints that we do have some northerly flow even directly towards the west of the system. But what ends up happening is then these winds start to fan back out towards the easterly direction. Even on the southern side of this, we still have easterly winds that are not really perturbated or disturbed by any form. So at the moment right now, this does look a rather loose wave, nothing very significantly organized at the surface. That is a circulation. Now, what does the water vapor imagery tell us in this video? Well, again, there is 97L. We do have an area of upper level tropospheric weather that we have going on. So we have easterly here, winds curve around and they do this and they kind of shuttle off like that. So we have a PVU streamer where we have this trough in the upper levels that does this. At the moment, because our wave is right underneath this axis of troughiness, there is actually not a whole lot of wind shear to contend with, versus this belt of feathery white cirrus that goes out like this. This is where we have 40 to 50 knot wind shear. Again, wind shear is wind direction change with height, and it's not upper level winds themselves like some of you might think. So at the moment, this is in a pretty conducive environment, very little shear and a lot of upper ocean heat content to work with. It's just this land mass that is preventing any further organization. Once this gets into the Gulf, though, things could change very significantly. Now, because our wave is evolving quite nicely than what models thought a few days ago, the National Hurricane Center has upped their chances now to code red. This is a high chance, a 70% over the next 7 days. So this seems more likely than not that we're going to get a tropical depression or tropical storm out of this. Our next named storm would be Debbie on our list of names for the Atlantic hurricane season of 2024. And again, a well-defined tropical wave is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Again, a well-defined tropical wave, though, rather broad in nature, and I'll show you that here on the models in just a second. Right now, this does have a high chance of development in a week from now. So now everyone's probably asking, will this strengthen to a tropical storm or even a hurricane? Well, the answer to that question is most likely than not. Once this gets into the very warm Gulf waters of Florida and even perhaps for Alabama and to the south, waters are really warm, and wait until I show you those here in a little bit. So looking at the GFS surface wind forecast here, again, green areas are 20-mile-an-hour winds. And as we go forward here, we can see, again, our wave envelope here is not very sharp. Okay, it is a well-defined wave, doesn't mean it's really sharp. And again, as I mean by that, oops, my pen is acting up today, where we do have winds that do something like this. Okay, you can definitely get an idea what we have going on with this wave. And when we go forward in time here, we can see that this does develop eventually. You can see here in the next 60 hours where we do have winds out of the southwest, and they wrap all the way around. So we have a much sharper wave here in 60 hours. This would be the 3rd of August. in the afternoon and evening hours for Florida standard or daylight time. And we do already have winds there of 36 miles an hour. Now, if we go forward in time even further, this could develop an inner core rather quickly. And if it does, this could become a tropical storm. Now, I want to make it clear there is a lot of uncertainty in the models here, and I will show you that here once we roll through all of the global models, and I'll show you each run that shows this in a different spot than the previous run. So that's a GFS model over the next 90 hours, and this then actually has it re-intensifying rapidly over the Carolina coast, right off the coast there, and then moves over Cape Hatteras, say in about 7 or 8 days. How about that? It's very different in prior runs. Here's a look at the European model. Again, very much broader wave envelope. The European has been really consistent at showing no tropical development with this hardly at all. In fact, there's barely, actually this is not even a closed wave in 3 days from now. That's pretty remarkable that the Euro is still showing this scenario and it doesn't really close off at all. It really remains open and disorganized, and then might close up into a tropical depression even all the way out to 180 hours. So we have some really wild outcomes, both intensity and location. Now looking at the Canadian model, the GDPS forecast, this is a global model just like the GFS. It does indicate a more coherent circulation, a more closed one, but still lacks serious winds with this. Only 15 to 25 mile an hour winds, then moves over Georgia, the Carolinas, moves along that area, and then moves out as a subtropical or an extratropical cyclone off the image here. And this would not impact New York at all. These three models do not have any impacts to that area yet. Now, what about the Icon model? The Icon's a little bit more bullish, at least when it gets off the coast of the Carolinas. Let's roll that through. Again, our wave doesn't do much at all over the next 50 hours, but then it tries to consolidate a little bit more better, a little more bullish here with the Icon than the other couple of models that we looked at, showing maybe a tropical storm here and definitely a closed circulation. This is not broad anymore. This is tight enough to declare this as a tropical storm. Moves over Georgia and Florida and then emerges, and then it could really strengthen on the other side to a hurricane perhaps over here. So some really wild outcomes on all four of these global models. And it's not just that. If we look at our previous model runs, let's just simply go out to day 5. Okay, so just remember, folks, that day 5 is here off the Georgia and North or South Carolina coast. All right, so I'm going to keep that circled in so you all can see that. And let's take a look now at the 06Z run. 06Z run has it in the same spot, but let's go to the 0Z run. The 0Z run has it over here, and let's go to the 18Z run. Pretty much in the same area. So this is a very tricky forecast. In other words, 2 models have it over here, or 2 model runs, and then 2 model runs have it, well, not moving up in that general direction, but then have this moving closer to Florida and then doing something like this in 5 days. There's a lot of uncertainty, and simple way to put it, probably the toughest forecast in a while that we have been facing with this system, because it has not developed a closed low and it's over land, which complicates things even further. Now, to make things even more complicated here, here's a look at the GEFS ensemble forecast. There is more than 30 models that run this ensemble, and this is an average plot of the state of the atmosphere over the United States. So here's the upper Midwest. And what we really need to focus on is the timing of additional troughs up here coming out of Canada into the upper Midwest as our disturbance down here begins to encroach and turn northward. This is very complicated because as we go forward, we can see here's our trough that comes down. This is going to help yank the storm northward eventually. When that happens remains to be seen, because if we get a northern area of concentration of this system, then it's likely to turn northward sooner rather than later. If we get the southern end of this wave that consolidates, it's going to take a lot bit more tug of war to get this system to turn northward, which at time could stall out still in the Gulf of Mexico. So when looking at this, this is 60 hours out, and this is more of a stretched out trough. So at first, if we go back in time here, we can see how it's kind of a lot of the energy is kind of consolidated. But then what ends up happening is it gets absorbed into this larger wave trough. So now instead of a more balled up energy trough, which could otherwise maybe cut off, this gets really disintegrated. This gets basically deformated into a rather sharp but very stretched out area of low pressure. Then you got your system coming in over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So now what ends up happening is now this trough is able to pull this northward, but now the issue here is it could stall out, and where it stalls out and when it stalls out will be really, really critical. This is an absolute fragile forecast. We have a ridge of high pressure over here over the Four Corners. We have another ridge of high pressure over here off the Carolina coast over the western Atlantic. In between this, we have this escape route, what we call the erosion of the subtropical ridge. And hurricanes and tropical systems like to find the least resistance to this atmosphere at 500 millibars. So what ends up happening, this trough then abates the area, so it moves out. And we have a little bit of a trough that is over here, which could actually help kind of tug this briefly to the west, which at time this high begins to encroach overhead. So you can see the heights here building back northward. The 588 contour, which is right here, begins to lift northward again. And the ending result here is we have a system that drifts or stalls over the area, because there's not really much to yank this northward anymore. Instead, maybe over here where the least resistance would be, but that is a very uncertain scenario. Again, we have tracks that still have this here. You'll see that on the ensemble, and we still have wild outcomes with loops and entanglements. Just not a solidified forecast right now because of the pattern that lies to the north. So that's going to be playing a huge role in a couple of days. Now, how much rainfall on the deterministic GFS forecast? Well, right now on this run particularly, you might see 3 to 6 inches of rain. But guess what? We've had such extremes here. If we just simply look at the 0Z run at the same time frame, you can see, like, say, Pensacola, Florida could get 52 inches of rain. If we go to the 06Z run, maybe only a half an inch of rain. And then the run after that, maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches. So we have extreme uncertainties, folks. Do not reverse your preparations just because that, oh, the system looks like it's going to do this now, or it might start doing this. We don't know yet. And we are not going to know until we get a consolidated area. And where this consolidates, we will know a little bit better by this weekend once the wave axis gets off the Cuban coast. Remember, for one thing, we have tall mountains that might amplify vorticity or de-amplify the circulation at the same time. So we don't know exactly if the northern lobe, the middle lobe, or the southern lobe will consolidate. Okay, and whichever one of these areas consolidates within this wave will be very much determined on who to the north might get impacted, or if it will go north at all. Because if it's so far south, it may miss that trough axis, the weakness in the ridge, and this might just drift slightly this way, which would be an unlikely scenario at this given time. There's no indications of that. Looking at the year GEFS ensemble, still again, Pensacola there, 3 to 6 inches of rainfall, while the deterministic forecast says otherwise. We could see 4 to 5 inches in northern Florida. Looking at the European ensemble forecast, still indicating quite a bit of water over Texas, so anywhere between 3 to 6 inches of rainfall is certainly not out of the question, especially along the Tampa Bay area, 6, maybe 7 inches of rain. It wouldn't really matter now if this becomes a tropical depression, storm, or hurricane. There will be significant impacts here, more than likely to some locations in Florida or even Alabama perhaps. the furthest west this could actually get. Now, briefly to emphasize this once again, I want to really make sure I'm thorough and honest with my forecast here. We have very wild outcomes. Again, for an example, the 0Z model, if we play this through right now, you can see the system literally stalling for several days over near Pensacola, Florida here. This would be a catastrophic situation, moves south and then moves back on shore over, say, Biloxi, Mississippi, perhaps Mobile, Alabama, and even New Orleans here. Now, if we look at simply the 06Z run, just 6 hours after that run, we can see a whole different situation. This actually moves on shore and then drifts and then retrogrades and hits Florida again. So you can just see a huge different scenario here. Where this stalls, when it stalls, will be very essential. Now, put this into better perspective here. Here's a GFS ensemble mean forecast with different tracks, or these are members. The atmosphere is tweaked 30 different times to get a what if scenario. And we still have, and I want to be very clear on this, we still have tracks that bring this still into Louisiana. We still have tracks that still bring this into Florida. Now, I want to be honest here that these are different initialization points down here. So again, where that consolidates, where the wave sharpens enough to where we get an area of low pressure to form. Is that down here? If it is, then this could go much further to the west and then maybe stall and hit, say, Louisiana. Say if the northern portion of this wave consolidates, say just off the coast of central Cuba, this could then move into Florida and then kind of remain a tropical depression at most, or maybe a tropical storm, loop around and then probably come close and then out to sea once again. Or simply we get a system that forms here, again the initialization point. This goes up the coast near Tampa Bay, stalls, meanders for a few days, and then does some crazy stuff. All right, this is a very, very fragile forecast. And again, with my history of tracking this kind of thing, we haven't seen anything this wild in a while, at least over the last 5 or 6 years. All right. And this is, again, a very uncertain situation, a very unfortunate situation, because we know for a fact this is going to probably stall somewhere. But if that's off Pensacola, Florida, Panama City, Florida, if that's off Tampa Bay, we just don't know yet. But it is worth noting that this cluster of cloud of possibilities here does show a high-end tropical storm or a low-grade hurricane, which again is a very much possible scenario versus something that is over here at first, which could be a much weaker system. It strengthens later on. Now, in contrast to the European ensemble forecast, there's 51 different members that run this too. Still a lot of uncertainty, but still showing a little bit of a cluster here of a possible tropical depression or tropical storm with winds of about 35 to 40 knots or about 40 to 45 miles an hour. But again, the initialization point here is going to be very crucial. Again, some of the models here do indicate that this is going to consolidate further south, while most of them indicate that it's going to consolidate further north. If it goes further north, it's going to hit Florida much sooner than, say, if this consolidates further west and then moves up and has more water time to work with. A couple of other model friends that I wanted to show you all here on the 18Z output, not many, 3 at least, but that's a better perspective than just looking at one. Here's a look at the GFS, the HWRF, the halves A and halves B model runs. So we got 4 on this invest already that that NOAA renders, runs the model through to see what we are going to get. And the halves B, unfortunately, has this much longer over the Gulf of Mexico. That's 1, 2, maybe 3 days over the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, it drifts. Actually, that is, I'm looking at that correctly, that is actually 3 or 4 days over the Gulf of Mexico. The HWRF really fast at first, slows it down dramatically just before or when it makes its approach over Panama City, Florida. And then, of course, the GFS is to the right of most of the guidance. So We can't sleep on this, folks. We really can't. And we might see shifts to the left or to the right. We may see shifts further to the left, or we might see it in the middle. We don't know yet. But now what we also don't know is how strong can this actually get? And this is a very, very fragile situation. For one, this is moving over some very warm Gulf waters of 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Secondly, we have plenty full of moisture here, at least in the first 4 days, greater than 60 to 70%. We have very little wind shear, less than 5 or so knots. So that's not a good thing at all, and really high upper ocean heat content for the entire forecast. So all of these really going to play a huge role on what happens to this system. And therefore, the maximum potential that this can reach is 170, 175 knots, which I don't think is going to happen, but that's a ceiling in this type of environment over the Gulf of Mexico. Again, if everything comes together just perfectly at the wrong time, we could see a very, 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 very strong hurricane. I don't know how strong. I don't want to make pre-predictions that, oh, we're going to see a Cat 5 or a Cat 4, but all you need to know is this does have a very high ceiling. Anything from a tropical depression all the way up to a hurricane at some degree. Now, quickly looking at the Gulf waters here on the sea surface temperature plot, courtesy and provided by the University of Miami, Florida. There's going to be a link in the description leading to this page. Actually, probably for a company guarded secret. Well, it's not really a secret, but I'll give it to you guys anyways. And we can see sea surface temperatures here. Anything in orange and red here is greater than about 31 Celsius. That is very warm. That is 88, 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, when we get into these pinker colors right here, that is 31, 32 Celsius waters. That is 90 degrees. And then this little patch right here off the coast of Florida, that is 90 to 91 degrees Fahrenheit. That is almost 33 Celsius. That is exceptional. So you could imagine if our wave develops further south here and then turns north like this, it is going to be moving really, really long over some high upper ocean heat content and some very, very, very warm sea surface temperatures on the equivalent of bathtub warm or even hot tub warm waters here. So this, no wonder why models have this going crazy, rapidly intensifying perhaps in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. And when looking at the anomaly on this chart here, definitely very warm, anywhere between 1 to almost 2.5 degrees above average with sea surface temperatures here in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico, the Big Bend. Wow, really, really warm here, really warm here even, and even off the coast here of New Orleans, Louisiana, we're seeing some very warm sea surface temperatures there, well above average, and even off the coast now of, say, eastern coast of Florida, seeing some really huge warm up of sea surface temperatures there too. Now, of course, the upper ocean heat content anomaly here is pretty much off the charts all throughout this track where this moves in. If it does this, if it does this, it's going to be moving over some very high upper ocean heat content anomalies that we have not ever seen in satellite modern era since records began in the mid 1900s. So now, with that being said, I really want you all to get prepared for a potential high impactful system over somewhere over Florida, maybe perhaps Alabama. And of course, Cuba needs to be watching this too, because this could intensify a little faster as it organizes. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on this over the next several days. I will be providing live stream updates, video updates, and rapid fire updates if necessary on this system, because yeah, we do have a lot of people that could be impacted by this with heavy rain, significant catastrophic flooding if this stalls anywhere at any time, as this could rapidly intensify potentially. We don't know for a fact. So you guys need to be getting prepared, have a preparation plan in place. I don't want to scare you all, but we need to be prepared for this kind of thing. It is early August after all. August is historically when we get a huge ramp up in tropical activity in the Atlantic, and this is no exception. But otherwise, thank you all for tuning in to today's detailed update on Invest 97L. Make sure you have a plan in place. Please share this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification icon and leave a comment in the section below this video. But anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll be back with you more on this situation tomorrow.